recording?
I think they do.
That's how you know you're official,
From
when Zoom talks to you, right? Hey, everybody, welcome to Expedia. My name is Rod Meachin. I'm one of the hosts, along with Eunice. We also have Valentine here from Expedia. We're really happy to have you here. First one of the new year, been a few months, and we are usually on the first floor, but because of construction or whatever, we're not, but we're in this awesome room up here with easier access to bathrooms. So I think I told most of you, but this is the door way down to your right, you'll see bathrooms. So that'll be good, but we just want to welcome you. Please spread the word, tell people to come and enjoy the talks and the facilities and all of that. We're very pumped to be the host of this thing. So let me pass it to Ted and let's learn some stuff.
All right. Rod, thank you very much. Okay, well, we're gonna get started. This is the first time I've ever done the Bleeding Edge News. It's been 8 years since I've been doing meetups with this particular group, but I've never gotten to do the news. I don't know why, but here we go. Woo. Okay, so we're gonna cover news from Bleeding Edge. I'm gonna cover that segment. And then Wesley Todd is joining us to talk about Express Forward. So first things, kind of some housekeeping stuff. If you're not aware, we have a very active Slack channel. There's lots of bits that get posted from time to time, and I have a lot of folks on there that I chat with and they ask questions to and stuff. So feel free to join the Slack. Also, we're always looking for speakers and for sponsors. And if you're interested, edgeatx.org, speak or sponsor, please fill out the form and kind of come join us to speak. I really want to say thanks to Expedia for hosting the meetup. This is, I believe, our second year hosting at Expedia, and this is from a meetup organizer's point of view. This has been just an ideal situation. We really appreciate the time and the effort and the facilities that Bob and others have put into this. And again, it really levels up the meetup to be in a very nice office space modern. So thank you, Expedia. Rod, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything.
No, that's all good.
And this week, my company, Acuity, is sponsoring the pizza and food. What we do is we actually provide LLM services. So is exactly what ChatGPT and others do, but we do it in a very private, secure environment. And we also we can capture meetings and the like, and we have some workflows for doing business in an enterprise space. So if you're interested, come talk to me about it, ping me. We are looking at all shapes and sizes, but one of the outcomes of what we do is we actually accelerate teams in terms of their knowledge and learning. And we're finding it super effective. Our velocity has gone way up because we use it every day. Onward. So libraries and frameworks, going to cover kind of what's changed out there. So last time we did this was October. So this update covers 3 months worth of updates. So November, December, and what is currently into January. So to start it off, so Bun had a release on January 16th. And this one was interesting because they are combining both serving web assets, but also bundling. So if you run bun.serve, it will actually build your local environment. So if you have a client-side build step, it will both build and on change rebuild and also serve those files from file system. Interesting feature set, but kind of convenient in terms of just bundling what we use these servers for all the time. But in doing bun serve, they also add support for HTML imports. So you can actually directly import HTML templates directly as code into TypeScript and run those inside of Bun. 43 bugs fixed. There we go. The next one I want to cover is Tailwind. So Tailwind is either today or I think it was either today or yesterday, releasing version 4 of Tailwind. And if you're not familiar, Tailwind is a utility class framework to assist with CSS. Instead of writing any CSS at all, you simply take class you take the class property on any DOM element and you just append classes. And those classes stack up to become the style that you want. But most of the classes are pre-composed. So in the new engine, they're replacing their build step in Rust. So they wanted a faster build process for basically generating from Tailwind CSS to regular CSS for output. But they've added support for variants, for cascading layers, and for container queries in the core syntax. So you can do some, although you're only limited by classes, you can do some pretty amazing things with that. And also on startup, you can basically have no configuration, just start it up, and it will detect what is available or where your style is, and then basically build from there. So they're starting to automate some of the lower level things that used to be very, I'll say, more tedious configuration. And in pairing with Tailwind is Daisy UI. I use Daisy UI extensively at our company, and we use it for all of our styling, but it's basically semantic Tailwind components. So you add a small number of rational classes instead of these fragmented ones that make your HTML look terrible, and nice quality components show up. And the beta 5 is actually built independent on Tailwind, so Tailwind 4. Although they're advertising zero dependencies, which I don't quite know how that meshes up with them being dependent on Tailwind, or if they're going to become independent of Tailwind, that would be interested in that. So, but the size has come down substantially. So down from 137 kilobytes for the full component set, it's now down to 34 kilobytes. So they're doing quite a bit of internal work to optimize what that CSS process is down to. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not they've gotten rid of a Tailwind dependency. So maybe yes, maybe no. Shall find out. Actually, I can show you part of the beta. So in the beta Daisy, buttons all different ways. Hold on, let me zoom in. And what's nice about this is the classes are kind of rational and readable, so it's really easy to read syntax-wise. But you get full theme support. So if I change the theme to say corporate, or corporate dark, or cyberpunk, and the themes are actually extensible, so you can put in your own theme and basically swap themes as long as those semantic values remain intact in your application. You can do some interesting things, but the component set also is fairly extensible. So in terms of dealing with accordions, and understand it's just HTML, there's zero JavaScript in any of this. So you're not adding things that cause dependencies downstream. They do have support for JSX. So in that sense, you do have React ability to kind of plug into this and use it from template. In our use, we just use the plain HTML. And it works really great. Let's close that. Moving on, React. React had a release in December, and some of the key things that were added were form actions was one of the primary areas of development. So being able to add smaller events on the things that are occurring. Additional hooks, use optimistic and use form status are kind of both related. These are brand new. And also they have a new API in play called use. And use ties into the way rendering is done, and it ties into promises. So you basically can re-render after promise result. So things won't suspend. And it's actually cleans up quite a bit of syntax in using promises with rendering. So notable releases, ESLint had released 9.18, and Electron went to version 34, and Puppeteer testing framework went to 24. Storybook released 8.5 in this month, and Cypress as well. So a lot of changes on the tools and technologies that we're readily using. So kind of move on to baseline. I don't know how familiar you are with baseline, but baseline is a new terminology for web compatibility with browsers. And web.dev has taken on building out Baseline. And Baseline is really a set of features that if you use that set of features and you stick to it, you will be compatible across all current browsers and future browser state. So the baseline is defining an active kind of living standard that everyone can depend on and build on. There is a new version this year called Baseline 2025. Last year was Baseline 2024. You see how this works. But each year they add items to the baseline, and that's where all browsers get compatibility for a particular feature, and that feature is added to the baseline. And so, drum roll, we have new browser releases, December 9th, kind of Safari release. Sorry, my slides got mixed up here. But Safari released on 18.2, Firefox released on January 7th. And actually Firefox has a new release on 135 that's coming out in a couple days. So I was kind of between which one do you show? Well, I'd show the one that's actually released, not the one that's in dev build. And Chrome 132 was released on January 14th. So in addition, so adding to Baseline 2025, this is the first API to be added to Baseline 2025. And it was added on January. It basically effectively it'll be active on January 26th when a scheduled browser deploys that fills in this baseline. So technically we're ahead of the baseline release, but they're announcing that it will be dependent on either the Firefox or the Safari release. Typically Chrome doesn't have a baseline problem. It's all of the other browsers coming into compatibility with it where that occurs. So promise.try. This is actually pretty interesting. So there's a whole class of errors that you can get from handling direct callbacks in promises. And using new promise, you can't trap an error if an exception occurs in the callback synchronous function. So in this sense, you can actually do promise.try. This will actually trap it and allow you to use the error handler. So catch error and will basically trigger the error handler if the callback fails. So it allows you to catch a whole class of errors that you could not before. But on January 26th, this will be available on all browser implementations. And it's be something that you should feel safe using moving forward. Now, what's not in Baseline, and I feel it's pretty cool, it's probably one of the cooler things that I have seen come to JavaScript. We've had web VR or 3D tech inside of the browser. But Web GPU is a ground up rewrite of all of the 2D and 3D drawing APIs, in addition to allowing you to manipulate data with the GPU. So Web GPU is giving you access to your own hardware on your machine and allows you to run computations on the GPU. And there's a whole industry that is growing and thriving, and I'm involved in, and it's fun, called AI, and it wants to take advantage of the GPU. So this standard is actually the bridge between us running really nice models locally in browser. It's probably the cleanest way to do it. I know everyone can run local tech, but the Web GPU for me has been one of the more interesting standards to come about. But all browser vendors are standardizing on Web GPU, and that standard is moving forward faster than expected. So if it's not Baseline this year, it probably is Baseline either this year or next. So, but it is really a high performance 3D graphics API, allowing you to render and process data. It's actually built on the native APIs of the operating system. So either Vulkan, Metal on Apple platforms, or Direct3D on Windows. And you would instantiate the GPU context similarly. So I would get a canvas context from an element that is a canvas element on page. I basically request an adapter from the navigator using the GPU. Again, this is TypeScript, so some of the syntax looks off. It's TS, not JS. And then device await adapter. And so you're actually requesting access to the GPU. Once you get the device and you have that handle, you can basically run computations on the GPU, the Web GPU context with the Web GPU device, and you can run shaders. You can actually build workflows, and I'll actually show you one now. But I think the more important piece here is it's both graphics and data processing. So for graphics, this demo is just 3D colored cube, and not interesting except when you take a look down at the code, it's actually loading vertex shaders, and those shaders allow you to run things directly. The code isn't too long. I mean, this is actually pretty elaborate, but what you'll see is the buffers and pipelines for how things render is all in place. So all of this rendering is a rendering pipeline to screen. And understand on video, it's probably going slower than it is on my machine. It's fluid 60 frames a second. So there really is no kind of delay. But some of what you can do in this are pretty incredible in terms of just, I'm going to change the dot size or texturize it. And then you can do some really interesting things with this one. What was the other one? But these are pretty standard ways to do 3D renderings and the like. But Web GPU is, it's pretty incredible kind of out of the box. But to show you some of the data processing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a model. So I haven't loaded the model, but I'm going to run this. I'm going to load the Shakespeare model. And then, sorry, my browser is a little small. And then I basically generate text from what's already written. And so the model is in memory. And so that's using my GPU on my laptop, not talking to the internet, with a model that was downloaded into JavaScript and is doing Web GPU calls against my machine. So the idea that we need to be attached to big things to do inference is, well, false. Everybody has a GPU. And I think we're going to see more and more uses and interesting use of client technology here, especially for small models. This Shakespeare model is tiny, but even GPT-2, which was open source, it's 1.7 million or 117 million, or sorry, 117 megabytes. So essentially, it's a fairly large model to download in the browser. Okay, moving on. I read this article across the new year, and I love this technology, but I really liked the ethos around what they were talking about. They were discussing the evolution of HTMX, which is a client-side JavaScript library, and their strong desire to be the next jQuery. And I know that sounds very strange considering where jQuery is in everyone's mind, considering the SPA, SPA frameworks and the like, but I think their focus is they would rather be a library focused on stability and building solid things long-term than adding features endlessly. And I thought it's a refreshing change from watching Vue and React add features endlessly, maybe not to the benefit of end users or developers, but to compete against a market. But interestingly enough, I find that interesting. And the idea though, jQuery, we don't think about it much, but jQuery, since it's been released, has had pretty much the same API and footprint, and it has remained compatible all the way to present. It's actually installed on 75% of websites. It's available for scripting on 75%. That dwarfs any kind of framework or use on the web. And something that widespread and kind of de facto standard, well, I just find it interesting that they would choose that as their target, and they would start to implement a kind of hypertext in a way that would elicit that kind of feedback, especially for libraries that larger and larger projects are becoming dependent on. But give it a read. It's actually a really great thing. It's on there. It's first page on their blog. Other one I want to talk about is NVM for Windows.
Ted, can I jump in?
Yes,
Sorry, I was trying to get the microphone working so Zoom could hear as well. Yeah, I like this idea of the new jQuery, because I've been thinking I've got teenage daughters, and I was like, well, what if I wanted to like teach them to code? Yeah. Well, like trying to teach them to code inside of like a normal development environment with Tailwind and React, like that feels crazy. But to get them a website with jQuery, I keep thinking like, I just wanna give them jQuery, right? Like that is a lot of what you need to just get started, right? And that does feel missing. I mean, do you think something like what HTMX could be like that either beginner and or just hyper lightweight sort of solution?
I mean, this is personal because I write it every day and I'm maintaining a code base in HTMX. And I gotta say, I used to manage CSS and I used to manage a big ball of JavaScript that we used to have to build steps process. And I used to have to manage all of the HTML kind of templates and CSS. So in moving to HTMX, one of the things that we've done is we write 1/10 the JavaScript we wrote. We write very little to no CSS because we're using Tailwind. So we're in HTML templates 99% of the time. And only when we need to reach for JavaScript do we do. And I think that plus server-side development is a pretty strong, it's a pretty strong use case. And it cuts through all of the, you need to build step and you need to compile this JavaScript app into this larger ball of JavaScript. It gets you to something you can actually be practical with, and I think that's really key for learning. You have to be able to change one thing and get a result. When the build process and tech is so complex that it's hard to get something to get that first triangle or to get something to move and behave, it's hard.
Yeah, and I think if you learn something that even if it isn't what your ultimate thing will be, but it builds, like just knowing more about how HTML works would benefit everyone, right? Like there's no like, even though I know you can get in React and never touch it again, knowing fundamentals. So I guess that's what I'm always thinking about is giving beginners something that's not useless later, right? That means something down the road.
Although it's very subjective, because if you had asked me 10 years ago what I would use, I would have said, you should use Vue and this is how you do it. And now you're talking to a different person.
And by the way, if anybody
different way.
wants a mic to ask a question or talk, just there's one.
Yeah, and I don't mind if we ask it. So Corey Butler had a release of NVN for Windows. Corey's been maintaining this for a long time and it's gotten quite a bit of use. He's one of our co-founders here. He's right there at the meetup. I know he's on screen. So Corey basically added NVN for Windows, added desktop notifications, and also started bridging in a new architecture for some work that Corey has been working on. But they also added ARM support, and I just wanted to say congrats to Corey on the release. It's pretty cool to watch this project over time. I've seen it for an awfully long time, and he's been doing a really good job. Okay, just for fun. So couple of interesting things that we'll take a look at. Okay, document.design mode. Okay, so this is crazy, all right? I don't know how familiar you are with it. I never knew about it. I guess it's been in the standard for a while, but if I do, where is it? JavaScript console. No, I gotta get out of full screen. I lose my browser. Gotta get it out of full screen too. Okay, and now what I wanna do, get to the console where I type document design mode equals on. Okay, design mode's on. And now everything is editable. And not just that, but I can actually move the page around. Everything remains editable. So this is where I kind of like, what just happened? Like, is this the perfect like WYSIWYG editor for like HTML development? Did I just flip this bit in JavaScript and all of a sudden what I see in my editor is what I get? I honestly, I was pretty shocked by it, but the implications is that I can have this really nice layout, somebody can do the structure, and I can have somebody else actually just modify the site and then save the HTML back to the server, page is saved, edit, done. So I thought this was kind of a toy, but in thinking about it over time, I've been like, it's a pretty powerful concept because everyone needs to just be able to touch a document and type. That's all you need to know to edit in Word or any Word document. But here we are in a browser and suddenly you have to get into HTML and understand the hierarchy of tags and how that works. This brings HTML editing to a lot of people. I'd love to see this turn into an editing mode where it would be easy to save, edit, and do kind of a release cycle. Especially if you were managing a blog or managing, site. If the editor was the actual HTML itself and you were just simply saving the HTML back to the service, save it as the URL because you're off the end, that would be, well, it'd be pretty cool. Anyway, so that is design mode equals on. The next fun one is a 3D cat in CSS. Now, this is the most elaborate thing I have ever seen. Each one of these pieces is an element in the DOM, in the HTML. And each of these is just DOM elements being moved. And understand that some of these are light sources, and some of these are the cat. And yeah, I mean, like seriously, this takes a lot of effort to do. And the numbering here sort of denotes what angle those items are. But there's no JavaScript in this. It's literally just a cat with DOM elements in 3D and the ability to style all of those. I don't know what the outcome of this is. It's one of those, I think it stops right here. I'm not sure you can go past this point, but I thought it was really cool. And it's like really innovative in terms of how you can use technologies that are not intended to do this, but do it in a way that's interesting. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to turn the talk over. Go ahead and get power in.
Yeah. Power this batteries last for like 5 days.
Dropped it.
Harder than I didn't
Make that bigger. It's my only professional headshot. I can release it.
I'm gonna have to rejoin the Zoom, which might mean I don't have the password anymore. Let's see if that works. I didn't agree to share my screen with Zoom beforehand.
All right, let me know if you need help. By the way, this headshot came from a perk. These companies will just throw weird perks at us, and they were like, the first 20 people to sign up for a headshot get a professional headshot. I was like, sure, I'll sign up. So
Do you have the Zoom meeting link
yes,
again?
I'll get that for you right here.
Cool. Yeah, I had to agree to share my screen.
You made a read out to you.
Oh, that would be easier.
Okay, you have 928, 3846, 1290. And then password, meeting code, or whatever passcode is 285 925. Oh, yes, that's right.
925. Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Awesome.
There we go. Let's hope I can share my screen. Go away. Okay, cool. Oh, I won't have my notes because I'm sharing my full screen. We're gonna wing it. Okay, so I may have to go back and forth, remember what's on the next slide every once in a while. And I'll read the mic. Okay, hey everybody, I'm Wes Todd. I work on the Node.js Platform Team at Netflix, but I'm also on the Express Technical Committee. I've been on it since I think about like 2017. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about some vintage trains, maybe? No, I'm just kidding. I know nothing about that. Oh, yeah, see, I even skipped right to the next slide without thinking about the rest of my intro. No, I know nothing about that, but you might actually think of Express a little bit like a vintage train. Very much a powerhouse, moves things around in the web. But, you know, it's been around for a while. And so what we wanted to do, and I'm gonna talk a little about today, was sort of brush up that brass on the front of the train and see if we could, you know, bring it back into the modern web. So it's kind of funny that I'm now giving this talk at a meetup called Bleeding Edge, because you know, Express has been around for a little while. Do you all use Express? By the way, there's gonna be a little bit of an interactiveness here, so feel free to yell out and interrupt and ask questions too. Yeah, so everybody uses Express. Okay, good, because I was thinking I would do a little pop quiz. Nobody's getting out their phones. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, I want to just trick you into that because I don't have the funds to do a pop quiz where it's actually interactive because Kahoot is like wildly expensive. I was gonna run this at I've given this talk before and I'm gonna run it, and I looked it up and I was like, no way I'm dropping $750 just to run a little pop quiz. So we're gonna do it the old fashioned way. I'll try to go through these quick. So if you can, I'm gonna just read the answers really fast. If you think it's the answer, just say woo or yell out or whatever. So we're gonna start with one. How much financial backing did Express get in 2023? I know this is a little dated now. Okay, so none. Okay, was that a
Wait.
we need a voice, I think. So okay. The technical committee had a pizza party.
Yeah.
Okay. Not enough to afford a Kahoot. Okay, we know that's not true because I didn't buy Kahoot for the talk, right? And then my main thing. Actually, none. So in 2023, we didn't get any funding, even though we're one of the largest. You know, we are the OG server framework and one of the most widely deployed. Since it's now 2025 and I last gave this talk in 2024, I will update this and do a quick. What do you think we got in 2024? Pizza? Probably pizza. So we started an Open Collective. We got our first $2,000 donation, and we're deciding what to do with it currently. Okay. So how many weekly downloads does Express get? Less than 1 million? 1 to 10 million? 10 to 50 million? Or more than 50 million? We're going with C? Okay, nice, right, yep, right on. Right now, we're averaging about 35, 34 million, depending on the week. Okay, how many major versions of Express have been released? 3, 4, 5, or 6? So everyone with 5? 6. We have an O.14 release published in 2010 on NPM. Yeah, so we've got 6 major versions of Express have been released. So this one I think should be easy. I'm thinking this is more of a technical crowd. I gave this last and it was a bigger audience, so it was like a little bit of a mix, and actually a lot of people got this wrong. But I'm guessing you all use Express and this is more of a technical crowd. So we're gonna nail this one, right? So is it serve, listen, start, or use?
Serve.
Okay, I'd submit, you know, this one is the same as Node.js's. So don't worry, a group of like 80 people also got this one wrong. So it's actually listen, the same API as Node.js, right? When you make a server, it's .listen. Okay, how many packages does the Express team actively maintain? 22, 43, 12, 67. Anybody want to venture a guess?
43.
43? 43, yes. Yep, so I don't think people realize quite how broad the project is. You know, we have, because it's the oldest HTTP server framework, we basically, back then, I say we, I was not on the team back then, had to build all of the libraries to build a reliable HTTP framework from the ground up, because most of this wasn't in Node at the time. So a lot of that stuff is still around for reasons, which we'll get into. Okay, so which of these is a valid route in Express? So we've got the first, I'm not gonna try to read these ones. So if anybody just wants to just shout out which ones, what you think the answer is, that's probably. best? We want A, B. They look kind of reasonable, right?
A. D, none.
Okay, so it is D, but this is only because all of, I'm skipping past, all of them were valid in V4 and none of these ones are actually valid in V5 anymore. So we've made some router changes. I'll talk a little bit about why and what we did there soon. How many TC members does Express currently have? 4, 6, 8, or 10? Anybody? Okay, we'll just go with this one. 8. What year was the Express V5? So that's our current major. Was the PR opened? 2010, 2014, 2017, or 2023?
17.
C.
C, is everybody good with C? Yeah? 2014. It was merged in 2024.
Because you said it's vintage, so.
It is a little vintage, right? This is our train metaphor here. Yeah, we polished it up. It's been around for that PR was open for 10 years. Okay, so this is where my notes would come in real handy if I had been better prepared about sharing my screen here.
Can you do the slide over? No, I guess not.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, well, anyway, we'll just, like I said, I'm gonna just, fly by the seat of my pants here a little bit. So, I'll just guess what I had planned to say and, hopefully, slideshow again. Cool, okay, so we're gonna talk about Express. So this is where I'm gonna just do my notes and you're gonna see my notes and hopefully, you don't mind. I don't know if there's any better way to do that.
Dead.
Well, yeah, so is Express dead, right? So this got asked in 2016. It got asked again in 2016, in 2021, in 2020, right? Like, does Express have a future? This project had a PR that was its next major version that was open for 10 years, right? So I think people were pretty justified in asking, what's going on? Does Express have a future? If so, why? And then once we figure out why, like what is that future, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is like why, because to me that's super important. Anytime you start a software project, if you don't understand why, you have failed the number one cardinal sin of software development, right? You'll end up building the wrong thing. So we need to spend a little bit of time talking about why Express matters in 2024. If it hadn't been updated in 10 years, what's the point in updating to the new major now? So first, obviously. And this is probably not big enough now that I've went to the speaker view, is it? No. Make this bigger and then get rid of whatever. Yeah, Chrome I can get, okay, cool. So it is by far the most popular HTTP framework in Node.js. Can I make it any bigger? No, it's not gonna go any bigger, but you can. Yeah, I thought it hides automatically, doesn't it?
On the far right, there's a little carrot.
That carrot.
It's down a little bit below the avatar.
Oh, I've got this Zoom thing covering me up. Oh, this one.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. Sweet. Yeah, that's good. Anyway, you can't see it because I'm not zoomed in enough, but Express is the blue line. We've got Fastify, Happy, Koa, Nest, Nuxt, Restify, and Sales. Obviously, by downloads, Express obviously matters to the ecosystem quite a bit. It's popular. See, that joke lands a lot better if I timed my stuff right and if I had seen my notes and knew that was the next slide. Okay, so by nearly all metrics, it's the most popular. It's also very stable, which I think is really great. We have a good segue to talk about why stability matters with the HTMX discussion. Express had not shipped a breaking change in 10 years. And that's pretty incredible for this ecosystem that ships breaking changes all the time. But with that comes a cost. So on the left here is the previous Express node matrix for its test suite, right? So it goes all the way back to 0.10, all the way up to 22. Supporting that many node versions takes a ton of compatibility code. So what you see on the right are a couple of the packages that are shipped with Express that are almost entirely there just to support old node versions. Methods, for example, because the list of HTTP methods was not in Node up until I think, actually, I wonder if it even says in the, well, 010 for sure didn't have it. And so these extra packages bloat the install, they bloat, they slow the thing down. A lot of the compatibility code is not written with the optimal performance for new Node, but it's there to make sure that the people who are running their Express app in 010 still in production, which I hope you're not doing, but there are people who do, still have a functional experience. So additionally, Express did something that you should never do. This comes from the very early days. Do you all know Matteo Collina? He's a Node.js core contributor, does a lot of speaking and is fairly prolific in these. Okay, well anyway, he loves to tweet about this. He's on the Node.js and he's also the author of Fastify, which is the best HTTP framework in Node.js, in case you were wondering. Definitely highly recommend. But he tweets about it a lot. So I would, when I gave this talk to the bigger group, I made everybody repeat after me. I won't make you do that. I will breeze past this. But the idea here that I wanted everybody to land is your JS library project should not override or monkey patch globals. I think that's one of those. That's the first tweet up there, right? So Express does this. It does it in a bunch of different ways. Again, he really likes to tweet about this. But he does it for a reason, because monkey patching makes it near impossible for Node.js to update its APIs, because those end up becoming breaking changes for all the users of Express, which, as we showed with the popularity of the library, is nearly the entire ecosystem. And so really, when we were looking at this, we felt like this was really good reason to justify us getting the project back on track, because it actually should help propel all of the Node.js ecosystem to be able to take on the next new challenges around HTTP frameworks in a way that if it just stagnated, we would never be able to make those next steps in Node. So we looked at all that, we said, okay, we do think it's worth it. We know why now. So let's talk about what is the future and what does it look like. So we took a few cues from the Node Forward project. I don't know if y'all remember that, but Node had some of its own stagnation happening, not nearly as bad, but a group of people got together and did a project called Node Forward, which resulted in IO.js and a bunch of other things, which has since been resolved. But we then put together a plan called Express Forward. As you can see there, we opened it on January 29th. So that was 2024, as a proposal to the community. Oh, I thought I had a slide in here about, yeah, that's the next one, of course. So these are the folks who worked on this together, Jean and Ulysses and myself. We were all pretty involved in some of the Node project stuff and then some of the OpenJS Foundation work. And so we got together and really ironed out this plan. It actually started, Jean and I were in Bilbao, Spain, where there was like an OpenJS and Node.js Collaborator Summit. And he was just like, Wes, let's like figure something out here. So he like grabbed a bottle of wine and we went to the hotel lobby and literally spent like an hour like in a Google Doc, just like, what could Express 6 look like? What could Express 7 look like? What are the things that are blocking all of these things from happening? And we just hashed it out. And then we found Ulysses was doing a bunch of work in the space too. So we involved him and people liked it quite a bit. I think seeing any movement in the project was pretty exciting to people. And so we got a lot of really good support. But what caused that big, bottleneck on this, it was really the governance of the project. So first thing we needed to do was unblock what had caused the problems in the first place. So we had to take on revamping the TC. We needed to really understand like, what is the contributor model to 46 different packages? Is it one BDFL? Because that's, even though we had some governance in place, it was operating as a BDFL and that person wasn't really available to manage 46 different repos, right? It's that the quintessential meme of the, one person in Nebraska supporting your open source, like that was it for 10 years. It's a phenomenal guy. I worked with him a bunch before, we did this revamp. But he was one person. You can't do this kind of work at that scale with just one individual, right? So anyway, so we did a whole bunch of stuff to revamp the governance. We got the technical committee back on the rails, going with the train metaphors here. So this was the technical committee when we started. This is it now. So as you can see, we added a few new members. Jean and Ulysses came on, who had helped work out the plans, and then John as well. This group is pretty small still. We'd love to see it grow, but we've set up a lot of the like policies and stuff that help people on board. So if you're interested in working in this kind of open source work, the Express project is probably a really great place to start now that we've gotten all of these sort of things, these on-ramps and picky governance things worked out. We also added this repo captain concept, which helps distribute that workload across the team. So we added a bunch of them. It turns out it started with mostly being people from the TC, but we're expanding from there. I'm trying to breeze past, by the way, a lot of this like sort of high level stuff and get to the technical stuff for the future. So, but feel free to ask me questions or pause along the way. So yeah, so we realized that if we were going to get version 5 out, we absolutely needed to fix the governance problem. We needed people to feel comfortable making changes across 46 different repos without like having to wait for one person's approval, right? Like that just doesn't work. So then I think you're probably all like wondering, okay, cool, V5. Now, when I first gave this talk, we had just released it, so it was a little bit more like an announcement then. But now we're a few months having released it. So I assume you probably all are thinking, okay, cool, you got the governance worked out in January last year. You went straight on to V5. Well, no, we didn't get to V5 yet. We also didn't profit. We still haven't profited, if that hasn't been clear so far. So the first thing that happened when we took over the project is we had a premature public disclosure of a vulnerability. And so this was actually something we were really concerned about is, obviously for a server framework, you need security to be top of mind, right? And with one person doing it and that one person being fairly, hands off with the project, these things just weren't getting done. So unfortunately what happened is somebody posted a vulnerability on the public GitHub and that's a 0-day bet, right? So we kind of had to turn on our scramble mode and figure out what we're gonna do. There's a pretty good story here, and I think this group might like it, so I'll go into this one a little bit more. So the public disclosure triggered us to think, okay, we've got to get a couple releases out. And because the project had stagnated with a PR open for 10 years, we had version 5 releases in the wild. So we had a pre-release version, and it got 25,000 downloads a week on NPM. So it's not a lot compared to Express, but it's definitely not nothing. And we had a security vulnerability that impacted both the mainline version 4 and 5. So basically we had to make this decision of like, do we leave the V5 pre-release users high and dry with a 0-day vulnerability and we tell them, tough luck, you never should have used a pre-release, right? Like, is that a responsible maintainership? Hopefully you all weren't in the boat of reusing the pre-release, but like, we got very close to being like, nope, if you use a pre-release, you don't get security patches. We didn't end up doing that for this one because it was a 0-day. So we ended up actually, and this, I think I spent like 12 hours one day resolving a 10-year-old merge conflict. So it was one of the most painful Git merges I've ever done. It was like 300 commits. And it was almost like half of them were conflicting. So I had to like literally go one by one to rebase the V5 branch on top of the V4 branch to get all the things in so we could then do a new pre-release of V5. It was a really interesting lesson because if you all have ever contributed to open source, I think you might see that there's like a lot going on. But what you don't see is actually there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, especially when it comes to the security thing. So this was like a super wake up call because like I don't get paid to, like, this is not what I work on for work. Like this was like a side thing. And then like, our 5-person group who was working on this had like, I worked a 12-hour day. I think one of the guys who lives in Spain was up until like 4 a.m. helping us like work through this. Like it was like, okay, yeah, open source is a ton of work sometimes. So this is a really interesting, I think, story, because it helped us refine sort of our process and understand. That was our first CVE that we published ourselves as the project. So it's kind of a neat experience learning how to go through the CVE process, make sure that all the, details of CVEs were filled in correctly, and they were correct to the, type of vulnerability that had been disclosed. Anyway, I thought that was a pretty fun one, but totally unexpected. And then in the meantime, we had a whole bunch of other security things start to come up. There's been a lot of work across the open source ecosystem around this in the past couple of years, and we kind of got caught up a little bit in it. So we implemented the OSSF scorecards across all the repos. These just help give like a little bit of a signal about the security health of projects. It's pretty important for folks like banks and government entities. It's not as important for startups and probably most people. We also got we got in on a OpenJS partnership with OSTIF, and we did a security audit. And that turned out a few small things, nothing too big. But what was really funny is that during the audit, one of our maintainers looked at one of the reports and then went, oh, no, we got problems. So that maintainer's name is Blake. He maintains Path to Regex. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that. It's used by like Vercel. It's used in a whole ton of different libraries. It's the foundation for the URL pattern specification that the Web3C, or no, that was Whatwig, I think landed. Whatwig. So basically, he found a redos in it. And I'll read his little quote from his blog. I woke up one day to the revelation that users of Path to Regex, including Express, Next.js, and others, contain a vulnerable regular expression. It's never been reported, but once you know, right? So we had a 0 day on our hands now, again, for the second time. Luckily, this one was not publicly disclosed, so we had a little bit of time to work on it. But this really led to some of the biggest changes we ended up releasing with V5. And it actually led to a couple of breaking changes which were released in V4. Luckily, we were able to figure out some ways around it. So the impact of it was anybody who had a route using 2 or more parameters between slashes, which is actually a pretty common pattern in Express. Like, it's not like in every app, but it's common enough that this was like a pretty high impact issue. And it meant that you could do this like malicious URL deal on the bottom where you just like repeat, like a character 16,000 times, right? That you can basically redos the server, right? So you take down the server with that. And so we spent a lot of time trying to figure this out. Let's see, going past it. This one ended up taking almost like 2 months to get all the releases prepped. So we did a lot of security work. So that actually delayed our V5 work quite a bit, but it was definitely worth it because what you have now in V5 is actually probably the most secure Express you've had ever in the history of the project, because we really dug deep on some of these security initiatives and made sure we were handling them well. So then we finally got to move on to V5. So we've been introducing this as the boring major. It was actually intentional to try to keep it boring. We released as few breaking changes as we possibly could because stability is one of our most, critical values with the project. As I mentioned, the PR had been opened July 14th, 2014, and it had a lot of participants, right? And it went on and on. Back then, I was the last comment in 2020, January 1st. I remember doing it because I was like, this year, 2020, this is the one, we're gonna do it. And I had like a to-do list of like 5 things. And then the PR stagnated more and then got locked, and there was, it didn't go. But finally, I merged it after fixing all of those merge conflicts and stuff on September 9th, 2024. So that was our big day. But it was actually a surprise. So we weren't planning on doing it then. That redos vulnerability was present in V5. And so we had done that whole work to do a pre-release of the like prematurely disclosed one, and we said, we're not doing this again. If we have any more security issues, we're going live, YOLO, right? Like you just gotta go forward with it. So what we did actually is we released under the next disk tag. So right now, even today still, Express the 4 is still latest, 5 is on the next extent, but it's very stable, and we've been seeing a lot of growth in users, and we're slowly releasing features on it. So the main things that we did for V5 release, we dropped all of the old nodes. I mean, that was like 100% the most critical thing for us to do. It was holding the project back. So we went straight to V18 for Node. That opens up a lot of doors. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second with the things we've been doing since. We added improved promise support. It's not perfect. We've got some ideas to keep improving it. We also need to work towards some of the web compat things that will be around promise support. But it was a great start. It was the initial things that we had to break so that we could then move forward. From that redos, we had some regex and path matching semantic changes. I'll go into those in a minute. Body parser, which I think probably everybody who uses Express is pretty familiar with, had some breaking changes, and then we just removed and gutted a ton of like old deprecated stuff. See, and I was supposed to talk about those as I went, but I'm just skipping a little bit. Okay, so what's next? So this is the work. A lot of this work is actually ongoing. So if this is of interest to you, we'd love to have you help out. There's lots of opportunities here. So we've been removing back compat dependencies. We've been landing these across the project. Again, 46 packages. We're ripping out anything we can. So like one good example is a package that I maintain because of Express, which is set prototype of. Back in the day, you needed a polyfill for that. There was like _ proto, if anybody remembers that. Those were not really supposed to be used, but now all major versions of Node support object.set prototype of, so we can drop that dependency. There's like things like just spread syntax and all that stuff, which we used to have to use libraries to do, mix in type extends, stuff. All that stuff is going. So tons of opportunity there. We're getting close to the end of the road on that though, I think. So next we're moving into performance. So this is going to be one of the real key things over the next, year or two. We actually got some funding from the Sovereign Tech Fund to fund an initiative around performance. So we're going to be doing a bunch of infrastructure to be able to test the performance of our releases. So we're going to be able to like see, here's a canary that we ran of the next version of Express on some real apps with some synthetic load, but like something that really tests the end-to-end performance of the framework and not like micro benchmarks. If people are familiar with server performance testing, a lot of naive approaches just use like a little micro benchmark where you like take the little one method you're trying to improve and you just like, run it 10,000 times. But that doesn't actually like solve your major performance things. That might get you like 0.5%, right? But like to get that like 5% or 10% performance, you need to really be thinking about like the whole app. So we're going to set up a bunch of infra, and then we're going to start, hacking away at like the worst performance bottlenecks of the framework. More modern features. So this is some things like diagnostic channels, which are really great for observability in your Express apps. We're going to be looking at web compat. I think I mentioned that before. So we want to have some level, and there's a lot of design work to be done here. Support for things like, I don't know if you all have seen Node.js. It's like a web API specific one. So it uses the service worker APIs and stuff like that, request response. And so all the APIs are browser compatible. We want to look at like, what is the future there? Maybe Express, can add support. We're going to, do a whole bunch of just administrative stuff, improve the automation for releases and dep updates, docs, hopefully some TypeScript improvements, in general, like, user ergonomic things, refactors. And then we've got like a huge backlog because I'm telling you, there's PRs that are open from 2015 that are like good PRs. Like they should have probably landed in 2015. So we'll be doing that. And then we've got more. We're going to be working on an LTS strategy. So we're going to mirror Node's LTS strategy. So we'll have a compat matrix for like what versions of Node each major version of Express has. And then we're going to set a support lifecycle. This will help us never get into that mode of like a 10-year lull of majors again. It doesn't mean we're going to suddenly be making breaking changes all the time. It's possible that those majors will just be dropping old Node versions in like a couple of small breaking changes. But at least we will have some sort of predictability that, users will hopefully come to rely on and can plan their, companies' migrations around, stuff like that. We started a security working group. This has been really influential for that, like I mentioned with those CVEs. A triage team. This is a really great way to get onboarded in the project. We've got a bunch of people who started on the triage team who are now TC members. It's a great way to just like get a broad overview of like what issues are happening, what things are people working on, and you get like, a little bit of extra ability. You can like label issues and stuff that you wouldn't be able to do if you were just, not a member of the org. We also moved to Impact Project in the OpenJS Foundation. So this, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the OpenJS Foundation, but it's the home of like Node, Webpack, Express, like basically all the major projects in the ecosystem these days are under the foundation. The foundation provides a ton of support around like legal and IP ownership and stuff that you don't think about these projects needing, but like every single one of them has had to deal with this at some point in their history. And then we're going to be moving on to V6. No, we still haven't made any profit. I did mention, since I made these slides, we did get our first $2,000 donation. So that's great. But beyond that, we're really trying to figure out like, what does it look like? Because we can't have this project go back to a single maintainer for 10 years if the Node ecosystem, can't move off of it, right? Like if people want to move on to Fastify, that would be wonderful, but they haven't in 10 years. Why? Right? Express is really great. It's stable. It's awesome, right? It's not like they haven't had technical reasons to move off, but that means that the old tech, which doesn't get the shiny love, from the people who want to contribute to open source, because it's not shiny anymore. It's the old train, right? We're not the fast new, bullet train here. We're like the old tech at this point. So we don't get the love that some of these other projects do. So we're looking for ways to sustain it and to make sure that it continues to be have that stability and we can still invest in it. So one of the first things we did was we joined this ecosystem sustainability program, which is a partnership with HeroDev. HeroDev provides LTS support, or no, what do they call it? NES, never ending support. So they basically, for when we deprecate versions, they will then go and do security patches and stuff on older ones for corporations that have like shipped. Like I have a buddy who works at Disney and he always jokes, he maintains CoffeeScript. And it's like, the project's, not got a bright future or anything, right? And he's like, but I will tell you, I have shipped code in CoffeeScript that is inside of kiosks at Disney rides that will be running there for the next 10 years, right? And so that's Node with CoffeeScript in something, right? So Disney, in that case, relies on some pretty old stuff. Corporations rely on this stuff one way or the other, right? At Netflix, we ship JavaScript to TVs. Those TVs have a 10-year life cycle. Some software needs to run for 10 years and it needs security patches and it needs reliability, right? So we partner with HeroDevs to help provide that. And then there's like a little bit of a thing with the OpenJS Foundation. And we haven't gotten any yet because we have one old version, which is V3. And luckily, almost no one uses V3. But when V4 goes out of life cycle, they'll continue to support it. And then that may end up having some revenue generated that will go back to the project and help us sustain future development. We've also done a few other things. We did start an Open Collective. That's how we got to 2000. We've got TideLift and we have GitHub sponsors. None of those are really actually driving very much in the sustainability way. And then I didn't have this in the slide because we hadn't signed it yet. But we are now doing a partnership with the Sovereign Tech Fund, which is a German government backed grant program. It's not really grant. I've been told I can't call it grant. It is a service agreement. So it's not a grant. We actually have to provide a service. So we have a whole list of, I think, 9 initiatives we're going to be doing this year around security. We got one for security documentation to try to help people understand like what are the basic failure modes that people forget about when they're trying to secure a Node.js web app, right? So we're going to like work on docs there. The performance work I talked about is part of it. And then we've got just a whole bunch of other initiatives. If y'all are interested, I can give links. And then that's where I was going to end. But I did realize I skipped over a little bit of the path matching semantics. So I'm not sure, this is my first time coming to the group, so what do folks want to spend, and how much time do we have actually? How do we want to spend the rest of the time?
I didn't know. This is a weird, if people have questions or anything they want to discuss that they've heard, I just wanted to open it up there.
Yeah, that'd be great too. Or I can go talk about path matching semantics, but it's up to y'all.
I had a question about Express and how it might be used as the underpinning for something else. So for instance, here at Expedia, back, I guess close to 10 years ago, we picked a node framework to build on top of. In that case, it was Happy, sorry, but it made sense for whatever reason, plugins or what have you. But regardless, it was like Happy was just underneath it, and then we built our own internal thing. I would assume that sort of thing happens with Express, but how often does that happen, and how important is that to the Express ecosystem to have it be the underpinning of other, usages?
Yeah, that's like probably the most common thing in the ecosystem. So for example, Nest.js has always been on top of Express. They added Fastify support recently, but the newest major released 2 weeks ago, and it is using Express 5 under the hood as its default there. So if you have built an HTTP framework ever, you will know that there are many moving pieces involved. And so rebuilding those is almost always a bad idea, right? So if it's your company and you're picking something, definitely picking a stable foundation like that is great, and Express is really good for that. So like probably every company I've worked at since I started using Node, so for most of my career, has done actually exactly that, has used Express as a foundation layer, and then built wrappers around it. So, and the wrappers I've seen take hundreds of different forms. I've seen everything from, these days a lot of GraphQL wrappers. So Express doesn't provide a whole ton of GraphQL things out of the box, but like Apollo, like I've seen a lot of people who wrap Apollo in Express and then add like an abstraction layer around it. And I've seen React. I mean, the startup I was at before I joined my current company, we were an entirely like React, server rendered web app, and we had built a whole like, I hesitate to call it framework, but a whole like ecosystem of things around Express. So we were actually using at the time the Express router in the browser as our main single page app router. So we had like an Express backend that would render static React, and then we would then hydrate it on the front end and use the exact same route handlers and everything. So it gave you like the experience you get now, right, with like, Next.js or Vue, or like all these other frameworks have that sort of out of the box. But you could build that on top of Express. Still, I wouldn't recommend it. These days, there's lots of better options that are getting a lot more love, but it's definitely possible and highly encouraged.
Anybody else have something? I have another question, but I want to let other people jump in here. I'll ask this. What does it mean to express the current trend of, and I don't keep up with all these, but Deno and the various, I don't know if we call them called node competitors, or just the sort of expansion of the node in, quotes, ecosystem. Like, what does that mean to Express and Express's future?
Yeah, we're not too concerned with it. There are frameworks that have compatibility, and they have then we have some layer of compatibility as well, but that's mostly because they're chasing node compatibility. So I also do a fair bit in the Node project as well, and the Node project has, I think, a similar outlook of we're going to do our thing, do the best we can. We're going to learn from them. We love having more options out there. And I think the same thing, for the Express project is something I've been, so I kind of bridge the gap here, because I actually got back involved with Express mostly because I was sick of hearing about Express being a pain for Node core. So I sort of tried to bring that mentality of like, if there's great opportunity to get compatibility, fine, right? That we would chase that if it was valuable. but it's not like a number one priority for us, and so it doesn't really drive our decision making all that much. And then to add on to that, there's a ton of really cool initiatives around standardizing, sort of like the baseline. What was the baseline thing? Sort of like that, but for the Node side. So like with Winter CG, they're trying to formalize, not, I don't want to say standardize, but some of the things our standards track the APIs so that these different runtimes can use them. So for example, like Cloudflare workers, right, James Snell is a Node core contributor. He works at Cloudflare. He's been driving a lot of that. And so I think there's a lot of great opportunity there. So like, for example, if they get really good compatibility definitions for those web APIs, like request response, right? We want that. So we would definitely take that, and then that would give us fun and maybe Deno compatibility. I'd have to look, I don't know off the top of my head. But like, we would rather chase the standard there than necessarily be thinking too much about, because these things move so fast. If we were trying to do that work, we'd be underwater just trying to keep up with the changes they're making. So we kind of got to pick a priority, and currently our priority is getting the project back to healthy, and then we can think about like what's the next step after that. Yeah.
Anybody like the mic? Question or comment?
Pass semantics.
Actually, Wes, I had one about the,
Okay, that's just so you know.
yeah, I had a question about the even odd node releases. I
Oh,
know,
okay.
I know one spans stable and one is highly unstable. And I saw the list of compatibility that you were talking about there, and I was just wondering, why would you support odd numbered node versions?
So Express specifically is in a very interesting place in the ecosystem. Because it is so widely used and considered so foundational. So for example, like if we said we didn't support Node 19, that would mean Nest.js can't support 19. That would mean Webpack couldn't support 19, right? I don't think Webpack ships. Webpack probably does. I don't think Webpack ships Express anymore, but they used to, right? Again, there was a lot of things that depend on Express, and so we chose to support those because we already were supporting them so far back. It was like it didn't phase us really. Now, I would caution you, if you are running a project, probably shouldn't use them. Probably shouldn't even support them if it's like an open source project that you're like a library. It's almost never worth it because you're not going to find anything in those. I promise you, because I've done it now. I've done this in, Express, but also at work. You're not actually going to find any breakage by running the bleeding, 19 version. The Node project is so good about this. They will most likely the most likely thing you're going to find is the same breakage is in all of the lines at once when they backport something. So we test it just because we have historically tested it, and the code is so stable that it hasn't been a big issue. But and then like. But I don't, honestly, I can't name a time that there was value in testing that. So like we could probably rip it out and nobody would ever notice. We're also, one thing that gives us that stability is we're part of Node.js's SitGem, which is Canary in the Gold Mine. So every major, definitely every major, but also many other minor releases in Node actually run Express's test suite before publishing, right? So there's this whole thing, we got a huge list of packages that Node Core will test against. Express is one of them. There's a whole bunch, you can go, if you just go to Node.js/sitgem, CITGM, that's the repo. You can see the list in there. And so we could actually probably just stop because Node will tell us when they break us. But it's just part of the matrix. And so we do. If you are at work though, don't use them. It's not worth it. Use the LTS. You're much better off. And also probably don't update the latest LTS all the time either. Depends on your company. Some people, mine is big and sprawling, and we do central releases of the majors. and they're very difficult for us to do because we have thousands of Node.js apps. If you're smaller, it's probably fine. But most of the time, unless you're gonna like immediately adopt, type stripping or one of these like new Node.js features, staying back a little bit, like, and being conscientious about when you do it is probably better. So I would definitely recommend staying in an LTS and a few minor versions behind, as a sort of practice. Yeah.
Nice, thank you.
Anything else? We're also getting close to time too, so I can probably just say thank you.
And then
You
we'll
can find
hang out in here and chat.
Yeah, we can hang out, chat. I'll be here. And also, you can find me on Blue Sky and on GitHub, and stuff. I'm around the JavaScript ecosystem quite a bit, so there's a million ways you can find me. Slack is really good too if you want to chat. So I did join the Bleeding Edge Slack, but I have to figure out how to get it open in my Slack app. It refused. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You wanna talk us out, Ted? Say goodbye to the Zoom people?
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and turn off the Zoom, so I'd like to thank everybody who joined us remote. Thank you.